Welcome everyone to the PyCon US 2020 online Steering Council keynote. We're sorry we can't all see you in person this year, but we figured we still wanted to be able to reach out to you and try to answer questions that people might have for us. My name is Brett Cannon from Canada.
I'm Barry Warsaw from the US.
I'm Carol Willing from San Diego, US.
I'm Thomas Wouters from Amsterdam in the Netherlands.
And I'm Victor Stiner from France.
Okay, so we opened up discourse and gathered a bunch of questions, and we're going to try to pick off each question and do our best to answer them. The first question that came up was, what is the Steering Council and what are you doing? Just in case you're not familiar with what our mandate is, we're an elected council of 5 members, and we have an election after every Python release. PEP 13 has all the details of the governance models, so you can go and read that if you want some details. Generally, we're all volunteers. Some of us have some support from our employers for some of the amount of time that we give to Python. PEP 13 specifically has a mandate, and I'll just go ahead and read that so that people who are unfamiliar with what the Steering Council's mandate is, you can read the details in PEP 13 again. So our mandate is to maintain the quality and stability of the Python language and the CPython interpreter, make contributing as accessible, inclusive, and sustainable as possible, formalize and maintain the relationship between the core developer team, and the PSF, Python's software foundation. We establish appropriate decision-making processes for PEPs. We seek consensus among contributors and the core team before acting in a formal capacity. And we act as the court of final appeal for decisions where all other methods have failed. So in general, we're primarily reactive. Topics percolate up from developers, such as new PEPs, and we manage those. And then we also look for identify issues and propose and drive plans to improve. So that's a little bit proactive. So we have both those sides. We have weekly meetings online, and Eva, who is the PSF executive director, participates. She represents the PSF. So the Steering Council does the technical issues for Python, the language, and CPython, the implementation. We don't do community. The PSF does community, but we work with the PSF where the two issues overlap. I think that's a pretty general outline of what the Steering Council does. So I'll hand it over to Carol for the next question.
Thanks, Barry. So the question is, what can the steering committee do to make sure Python continues to serve the needs of all its users, and not just those who have backgrounds similar to our excellent core developers? So Python's strength has always been that it has been used in so many different types of work and projects, education, web, more recently science and data science, embedded. So there's lots of places that Python touches, and we rely on the community to get your input and to provide user-friendly workflows for you so that you can contribute to CPython. And some of the ways we've done that recently is triaging a triage team and more mentoring of people to become core developers. Additionally, one of the things we did this year is we opened the Language Summit to a number of individuals that are not core developers, who then spoke about areas that Python touches in their work and where they see Python could be going. One of the things that we're going to start is a documentation work group, since documentation is so key for helping people learn. And that work group is going to be a cross-section of core developers, documentarians, and community members. And in addition, on the brass tacks of the language itself, we've added a section to the PEPs on how to teach any new feature that gets proposed in a PEP. So those are some of the things that help us be inclusive and serve a wide variety of users, whether they're children or people who've been using Python for many, many years. And with that, if any other folks have something they want to share, great. If not, I will turn it over to Thomas.
So the next question is actually a combination of a number of people's questions about the Steering Council priorities and our thoughts on staffing for CPython. The Steering Council priorities, there's a number of things we care about that we can work on, but as Barry pointed out, we are mostly working on issues that percolate up from the community. We still have things we want to focus on. One is fostering the CPython developer community, that is helping people improve diversity, inclusion, helping people mentor, providing them the tools and the opportunities for these things. Part of that is financial support for CPython development. We have a very vibrant volunteer community. We absolutely do not want to mess with that community, but we do see opportunities for some paid work on CPython for doing the boring, tedious jobs that volunteers just hate, or some volunteers hate. There's also the opportunity for some of the larger projects that require long-term investment that are always a little harder for volunteers to work on. And then there's also the fact that some companies would like to support CPython development, would like to provide financial support for features they would need. And we want to be able to do that without relinquishing control of CPython. So without giving the companies outsized handles on CPython development, like if they would hire a whole bunch of CPython developers. We also want to encourage experimentation on that front and development of Python in ways that simply maintaining CPython doesn't cover. We want, for instance, to evolve the Python C API in something that is more easily used by other Python implementations like PyPy as well, and Victor has done a bunch of work on that. We would like for larger scale optimizations to work on CPython, like removing the global interpreter lock or switching from ref counting to other garbage collection strategies. Those are very large projects, and it's not something that volunteers are easily able to tackle. And then there's the issue of underserved platforms like mobile or small hardware, where the experience of the current volunteers just doesn't give us enough to work with. So we need to bring out some outside expertise, and the PSF has funded some of this work, or is currently funding some of that work as well. So talking about funding for staffing, we would like to hire people to do some of these things. Like I said, keeping in mind that we don't want to mess with the volunteers. We don't want to ruin anyone's fun they get from working on Python either. So we had a little survey among the core developers a couple of weeks ago, or a couple of months ago, with the idea of suggesting paid work on CPython at PyCon, funded by the PSF and whatever other funding would be able to pull in. We put that on hold because PyCon had to go online because of COVID-19, and we'll probably delay this until probably next year when the financial situation of the PSF has improved, unless of course we get significant corporate funding of the PSF. But anyone else comments on this? If not, Victor?
So the next question is, what plans are there for improving the situation for open issues and pull requests? I think this is a common question of all people who try to contribute to Python, and we are all aware of the situation. So there is no big plan to fix the issues. The idea is more to continue to do what we already did well, especially mentoring, which is an old practice in CPython. The idea is to promote mentoring and to do that more often. The idea is to do more pair programming, so to have a one-to-one relationship with a specific contributor to help out for specific questions, because we identify that this way the promotion from contributor to our core developers becomes way faster, and it has been proven to be very efficient because we promoted many people thanks to this way.
Mm-hmm.
So for mentoring, we have a developer guide which describe all steps to do this to contribute to Python. There are also tutorials on other documentation. But thanks to the mentoring, we built something which is very important in open source, which is a trust relationship. Because the trust is something very important when you give more permission to someone. Because if you don't trust someone, you cannot open the gate for pull request, for example. And again, the mentoring is a good way to build a relationship between two persons, but also to make the work on one individual more visible. And for example, what we started to do is also to give the bug triage permission thanks to mentoring, because this is also a way to make it more visible that one individual is mentored as a mentor. So mentoring is one way, but the other way to simplify the contribution and to make them more efficient is also to work on the workflow. And if you look back at the last 2 or 3 years, we made significant enhancements. Like for example, we moved to GitHub. We have a pre-commit CI, which is something very useful to prevent to merge a change which breaks, for example, the Windows support or break all CI. We also have a new features, which is a buildbot label to test a pull request on a specific set of buildbots, which is something very useful to detect even more issues on some platforms or detect reference leaks, for example. We have automated backports, which reduce the maintenance burden because the process of creating the backport and matching the backport is fully automated. So it just takes a few seconds. And we even have the automated merge. So we don't have to wait until the CI pass. We just have to ask the CI to merge the pull request as soon as the CI pass. And one big task to ensure that the workflow is still relevant and continue to work is to maintain the CI. So to analyze the buildbot failures, to open an issue for each failure, and obviously to fix all of them. And we did a great job to fix a bunch of unstable tests to make the CI really stable. So that's all, Brett.
So we actually got asked by a couple of people a question which can be surmised as, what's up with packaging? Now, this is kind of an interesting question to be asking the steering council, because actually packaging doesn't directly involve the steering council. For historical background, Guido basically wasn't into packaging. And so an independent group of people got together and started to manage that kind of aspect of the community and the development process. And at some point, Guido officially devolved power of the packaging ecosystem from at least from a pip setup tools virtual environment aspect of packaging. And the Python Packaging Authority came about. When the steering council was formed, we continued with that practice and continued with the devolvement of power to them. Now, there is overlap between the core team and the Python Packaging Authority. For instance, I'm a member of both. So I happen to be in a position to be able to answer this, but to be very clear and upfront, the Python core team does not manage packaging. That's managed by the Python Packaging Authority from basically a non-Conda perspective. Now, to answer the question of what's going on with packaging, there's been a general drive over the last short while. When I say short, this is measured in a couple years versus a few years, to give you speed of packaging, to try to move everything towards standards, specifically PEPs, and to try to get libraries backing up those PEPs. With the idea being that we want to open up the packaging ecosystem to innovation, because historically it's been very tied down to very specific projects where moving quickly is hard because build tools don't like to break people for good reason. And if you move too fast, there's a bigger chance you're going to break someone's workflow or unexpectedly break the building of someone's source distribution to a wheel, for instance. All of this kind of leads to an area where projects like Setup Tools and pip can innovate to an extent, but also have their hands tied because they can't change things too quickly or too widely because they have a huge amount of backwards compatibility to worry about. I mean, Setup Tools, for instance, has been around since the beginning of the 2000s. So because of that, we've been trying to make movements into standards, and by doing that, we've been trying to make it so that tools know how to communicate with other tools. A good example of this is PEP 517 and PEP 518, which introduced the PyProject.toml file format for packaging, and the API to allow people to specify what their build tools were for their build backends and how to call those build tool backends. This is what's allowed projects like Flit and Poetry, for instance, and pipenv to come about and be useful overall because, for instance, pip now knows how to call any build tool, not just Setup Tools like it did historically. And we're basically just moving towards expanding that as well as we can. Basically, just as I said, standardizing and making it so that you standardize more on the interfaces and the artifacts that are being produced, less than the tools specifically. So the hope is we'll have more opportunity for people to try things out, to get a workflow that works for them, and we can all standardize on more or less the artifacts that get produced, and less on the specific tools that people are being expected to use. But that's all happening. Unfortunately, we're moving at the speed of volunteerism, which is very hard to move quickly because it's all being done in people's spare time. There's no real direct corporate support for any of this. There is some nonprofit support for PIP and PyPI, but obviously there could stand to be a lot more help for anyone who can help. But things are moving forward, things are being decoupled, and things are being made such that things can move forward at a potentially faster pace. And that's basically the status of packaging. It's moving forward and moving forward as fast as possible, but we just ask everyone to be patient while we try to open it up to a wider community.
I just want to add that I personally am very happy that there is a PyPA and that the steering council does not have to deal with the thankless and very complicated job of packaging.
Yeah, and I have to say a big thank you to the folks that have been working really hard the last couple of years. The documentation has gotten really good. So if you haven't done a release in a few years, you might want to check it out because it is really quite straightforward now and has a great tutorial. So thank you to all.
Packaging.python.org.
Yeah.
Say that again, Thomas.
Packaging.python.org is where you'll find the documentation nowadays.
Yeah. Good.
I'll just say that I appreciate the community being understanding. I know when this all transitioned, when was this? Summer of 2018, July was the fateful day of Guido's grand statement. Or was it 18? God, I can't keep track anymore.
18, yeah.
18, yeah, it's 18. I personally appreciate the community support and understanding in this transition. I know there was a huge amount of questions about how the transition would happen starting in July and where it was going to all end up. And the core team, I think, did a very good job in trying to manage that transition and figuring out how we're going to govern ourselves and get to this point, and then having that happen in the inaugural steering council and everyone understanding that we were all trying to figure out how the heck to make this even work and figure out a rhythm here in this second steering council that we're all a part of now, and trying to move past the what are we going to do as a group to what can we now empower as a group, and I am very hopeful and expect that going forward for the rest of this year and the next council going forward, we're going to have an opportunity to hopefully continue on this momentum to go from the what the heck are we doing to knowing what we're doing and then actually executing on what we want to do.
Yes, and a big thank you to all the core developers for making this process as smooth as it could possibly be, and for all the work that you do on a daily basis. We don't thank you enough, but we really would like to do so. So,
yeah.
Great. Well, yeah, let me echo my thanks to everybody, the previous steering council, the Python core developer community, and the larger Python community. All of you out there who use and love Python, we're doing this because we love Python also, and without everybody's input and contributions, we wouldn't be here, and we wouldn't be having as much fun with Python as we have for the last 30 years. So I just wanted to mention a couple things in closing. The first thing is that we're accessible. You can always email steering-council@python.org to get in touch with us if you have concerns, questions, if you have PEPs that need pronouncement on, or any other technical issue. Please feel free to reach out to us. We're here. That's exactly what our purpose is. We're looking forward to Python 3.9, which is currently in development and is scheduled for October of 2020, later on this year. You can look at PEP 596 for the detailed release schedule. And we want to thank all of you for watching. We hope you stay safe. And we all desperately hope that we see you in person at PyCon 2021 in Pittsburgh next year. So with that, unless there's any other closing comments, we just want to say thanks, and hopefully you enjoyed our little virtual steering council reshow. So.
Thank you. Thank you, Barry.
Stay safe, everybody.